Hey, this is artist Tara Reed and welcome back to my studio. Today, we are going to take the heart quilt blocks and turn it into a gift bag. I'm going to use the smallest size, the 4-inch block, and turn it into a sweet little gift bag for Valentine's Day. Now, if you haven't made this heart block yet, check the link below in my video, and I have another video tutorial that'll show you how to make this, and you can get the free directions to make it in 5 different sizes. But let's get started turning this little sweetheart into a sweet little gift bag. Let's talk about the supplies we need to make this super cute drawstring quilt bag. First, you're going to need the 4-inch heart quilt block. And if you don't know how to make that, there is a link below in the description. So we need 2 lining pieces, a back, and then a few different strips to make this. Then for this bag, we're going to do an external channel. Let me show you. So this one has a white heart. The one we're going to make is going to have the flowered heart. So it'll be the opposite of this. We're going to do a fabric channel that gives it a little bit different accent, just a different way to do a drawstring bag. So for that, we need 2 pieces of fabric because there is going to be the channel obviously on both sides. Then 2 pieces of whatever you want to use for your drawstring. I used a satin ribbon. Then I just always keep an inexpensive bottle of clear nail polish in my studio to put on the ends of things that are going to fray. Then you need pins or clips, a safety pin that's going to help you get your drawstring through the channel, heat erasable pen, huge fan of those, some rulers, rotary cutter, rotary mat, sewing machine, obviously, ironing board. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to assemble the front of the bag that has the heart on it. So you have these 2 pieces, the skinnier one on the bottom and the bigger one on the top, because we need to have room for that channel, a little puffy fun on the top, and make sure that the heart doesn't get scrunched. So the first step is to sew these 2 sides onto the heart block. So I am just going to clip those together. We're going to sew them with a 1/4 inch seam, and then we are going to press the seams away from the heart. Now I sewed these 2 sides to the heart block, and you'll notice my heart block was a little bit short. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a ruler and I'm going to square that up. So it'll be a little bit shorter, but don't you worry, I'm going to show you how to fix this. I'm sure I'm not the first person to have a slightly off block. Next, we are going to clip and sew these 2 pieces on. There's one piece of fabric that's just a piece of fabric, and there's another piece that has multiple seams to go over. I like to have the seams up so that I can make sure they stay in the direction that we press them as we sew. I'm going to stitch and press that, and then we will do the same for the larger piece. Now we have the front of the bag sewn together, and this is a little bit smaller. So you could either wing it, but then you're going to have a really small margin there if you do a seam allowance. So I am just going to take this, line up my 3 pretty good edges, and I'm just going to trim this so that it is straight on this side. Now you might be saying, Tara, now everything else is going to be messed up. Your lining's not going to be right. The back isn't going to be right, but don't you worry. I'm going to show you how to fix that too. All right, so our top is done. So now I'm going to take the back and both of the lining pieces. I'm going to place the front on top of that stack. And you'll see it's a little bit bigger. So I lined up these 2 edges, and now I'm just going to trim these other 3 so that everything is the same size. Now that we have everything sized correctly, the next step is to sew our lining pieces together and our outer bag pieces together. So you'll notice that when I put these together to cut, I already put them right sides together so they would be ready to roll. Then I'm going to take the back of the outside and place it on top of the right side of the heart. Now you can pin or clip. Big fan of clips. I find them faster and they never poke me. Do you have a preference? Have you ever tried fabric clips, or are you a pinner? Let me know in the comments. Let's have a contest. Pins versus clips. When I sew the outside, I will flip it this way just so that I can make sure these all stay in the direction that they are pressed. So I probably should have put the clips the opposite way. You'll notice one side is flat and one side is colored and curved. It still works even if they're upside down. So we're going to sew down across, so both long sides and the bottom of the outside, leaving the top end open. For the lining, we're going to go down both sides and only part way on each side of the bottom. You want to leave about 3 inches open for turning. And I usually just take this heat erasable pen, draw some little lines so that when I'm sewing, I don't forget. But if you do forget and you do the whole thing, that is what seam rippers are for. Once we sew those, we are going to press the seams open as best we can. It is a little tricky to press the bottom seams open, but do the best you can because having them pressed open is going to make doing our box bottoms that much easier. You don't need to cut the corners like you do in many projects because we're making a box bottom and that will get cut off automatically. So we just need to press these seams open. I've pressed most of the seams. On the lining, I pressed it like it was sewn, but it does have that opening. That's going to help me close that properly later. I'm going to just put this piece of fabric down so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so on these box corners, we're going to need this to be flat because we're going to sew across. And you want this seam lined up with this seam. So I have found, I do this different every time. So this has been pressed open and this has been partially pressed open. So to finish it, I'm going to line up these 2 seams by pulling this out, open the bottom of this seam with my fingers, and then I'm just going to feel and make sure I have these seams lined up. You can take a pin, put it straight through that seam, and then see if it comes out the seam. Nope, not quite. So now I know I just need to scooch that over a little bit, so that the pin is going through the seam on both sides. I'm going to hold that flat. I'm going to test one other section. Okay, got it good. Now I'm just going to place that down. I'm going to hit that with some heat. And I've learned that by doing this while we're ironing, it makes making our boxed corners go a lot faster. All right, so we have these sewn together. We have these pressed, so we're ready to do the box bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each of the 4 corners and I'm going to lay it flat. Okay, I'm going to do it like I'm right-handed. I'm going to lay it flat with the point going to the left. Then I'm going to take a ruler and we're going to draw a line 1 inch up the seam. We're just going to go straight across. If you prefer, you can measure 2 inches. You'll see it goes from 3 to 5. So it's 2 inches long and it's 1 inch up. So whichever way you prefer, go for it. Then I'm just going to pin that so it stays flat, and we're going to repeat for all 4 corners. And again, this is a heat erasable pen. Some people might freak out that it's a little bit dark. We're going to stitch right on that line, but if for some reason you still feel like it might show, you can just hit it with the iron and it disappears. To me, that is a must-have for everyone who sews. Okay, we have all 4 corners pinned, so now we're just going to sew on that line. Now, if you want to save a little bit of time and thread and you want to daisy chain these, I have found putting them in the opposite direction works the best because then you're not overlapping, you don't have a bunch of nonsense, and you're not trying to get across that big gap. It just lines up perfectly and you can really get it in there. Just make sure it's feeding right to that line and keep sewing. Then you just cut the first one off, turn it over, and repeat. Okay, well, joke's on me. I have 2 cameras that I use for filming these videos, and I thought both were on and one was not. So I cut off these corners without it actually filming. So I'm just gonna walk you through it. It's pretty easy. We had all of the box corners sewn on the lines that we drew, and then you're just gonna come back, pretend that's sewn, and you're going to take a ruler and you're going to line it up 1/4 inch from that stitch line. And you're going to take your rotary cutter and you're going to cut off those ends. So we cut off all 4 of those box corners. Now we need to sew the top edge. So we need to get these bags right sides together. I like to turn the outer bag right side out, push out those corners, and I put this inside the lining. We just leave that because, again, we want to get these together right sides together. And the reason I put the outer bag into the lining is so once I sew, I already have this ready to go with access to the opening to turn it right side out. So we're going to match these seams, and I like to match both sides of the seams first. Then I just kind of pull it out, and that usually lines those raw edges up quite nicely. But if they're a little bit off, just scooch them with your fingers and get those clipped into place. Now we are going to sew all the way around the top with a 1/4 inch seam. We don't have to leave anything open, so we're going to get a nice stitch line on that top of our bag, because we already have the opening to turn in the bottom of the lining, because we are super smart like that. If you have a sewing machine where you can remove your accessory tray and get this fed into your machine so that you can stitch on top, do that. That is not the kind of machine I am using. So I have to basically sew on the lining and go around. So I just keep it out of the way this way. Both work. Now we have that top sewn. I'm just gonna grab some scissors and quickly cut off some of these longer threads. You do have to be careful with stray threads in your bag if you have white, because if you have one of these dark red threads floating around, you're gonna see it and it's gonna make you sad. Now we are just gonna turn this right side out through the bottom. Now before we press this, you need to close this opening in the bottom. And you can either hand stitch it so that it'll be totally invisible, or if you don't mind a little bump, you can put it on your sewing machine and just stitch straight across. I usually do that, honestly, because it's at the bottom of a bag, really not the part most people are inspecting. So you'll see there's a little bit of a bump there, but you're not going to notice that in the bottom of a bag, especially since I matched the thread. The next thing we need to do is push the lining inside the bag, and then we have to press this top edge. So we want to get it so the seam is out and you're not seeing the outside on the inside and you're not seeing the lining on the outside. So I get it lined up, started, and iron that, and then I just keep adjusting where that seam is as I move it around. And I like to take my time with this step because this is going to be the very top edge of your bag, and having it pressed really well and lined up really well makes a difference to how professional your bag looks. Now, the next thing we need to do is make our channel for our drawstring. So I'm going to grab my 2 pieces of fabric, and I'm just going to finger press them in half. So I had the wrong side up. I'm going to finger press. I'm not going to press with the iron because we don't want this crease to stay. It's just a guideline. Now, I often say fold this ends under a 1/4 inch, then blah, blah, blah. But sometimes you then have to adjust it to your bag. I'm going to show you my new secret. Lay my bag flat. You're going to line your drawstring up 1.5 inches down from your top edge. So I'm going to place my ruler a little bit past 1.5 inches, and I'm going to take this, don't worry, heat erasable pen, and it will be under the channel. I'm going to draw a line there. And I'm going to do the same on the back. Now, you want to get your bag so that your seams are on each side. So not twisted, but you want your seam right on the edge because these channels are going to each end at the seam. So now I'm going to lay this on top of the bag. Doesn't really matter where compared to that line. And I'm going to fold it so that line lines up. Now, before I press it, I'm going to move it off because now that I'm thinking about it, I already drew a heat erasable line. And if I did this on top of here, that line would go away. And then I'd have to do it again, which wouldn't be the end of the world, but heck, why do it if you don't have to? Just scoot your fabric a teeny bit. But this way, you're going to have these ends folded over exactly the amount they need to be. So you're not going to have to adjust it later. And I'm going to do one at a time because I want to make sure I put it on the correct side that I made it for. Now you can see where we had finger pressed, right? We have that faint line. You're going to fold the raw edge of the fabric into that line and press. And it's okay if that line disappears now because the other raw edge is just going to be folded to match this first raw edge. I'm going to flip that over and I'm going to pin this on, and then we'll do the second side. So I'm going to line this up just above that line that I drew, because remember we drew it a little bit more than 1.5 inches down. And I'm going to start at that side seam. Just make sure it stays nice and flat and those ends that we just pressed stay under. You don't want to pin it to the back, so make sure you pick it up as you do this. So this way of doing a drawstring basically makes it so that where the drawstring goes is a decorative element of your bag. So we have that one all set up. Now we're going to do the same thing with the second side of the channel. Now, if there's a little bit of a gap when we sew this together, that's totally fine because your drawstring does need to come out and go back in on these ends. So it doesn't have to match absolutely perfectly. And next we are going to sew on both sides about 1/8 of an inch from that edge to create our drawstring channel. And when you get to where they match, go back and forth twice just to reinforce that section because that's where your drawstring might put a little bit more pressure. All we have to do is put the drawstring in and then decide what kind of gift is going to go in there. So I'm going to take my 2 ribbons that are 22 inches long each. We're going to do an experiment. This one, I have put the nail polish on ahead of time before putting it through the channel. And this one, I have not. So let's see if it makes a difference. So I'm going to put your pin, and then you're just going to start on one side. Let me know in the comments what kind of material you like to use for drawstrings. Then you're just going to pull that out when you get back to the same side. So pushing that ribbon through without it having any kind of fray check or nail polish made it a bit messed up. Line these up and put a little knot because I want my bag to be able to open all the way before it hits that knot. So I am going to put this nail polish on there. You need to trim any pieces that are kind of flying off like that. Then I'm just going to hit it with this nail polish so that it doesn't keep fraying. And these, I already put the nail polish on and I let it dry. So we're going to now do the same thing, put it all the way around, but you're going to start from the opposite side of the one you did before. Okay, well, I think we have a winner chicken dinner. You definitely want to put fray check or nail polish on before you put it through your drawstring channel. Now I'm just going to knot that side. Look at how cute that is. So let's look at the other one that is the opposite. Super cute set. Which do you like better? Let me know in the comments. And if you make any of these, I would love to see them. I'd love to see what fabrics you pick. These bags are now 9 inches by 7 inches with a 2-inch bottom. So you could fit lots of stuff in there just for storage, for a gift, or whatever. So this is great for Valentine's Day, maybe an engagement party, just someone who loves hearts. Something fun, but make sure you have subscribed to my channel so you see more of these fun, quick tutorials of things that you can sew at home.